So I am just honored at the moment to introduce our speaker to you tonight. If you've been around for a couple of years, she's actually been with us every year, at least at one or two gatherings. Her name is Kristen Fry, and she is a phenomenal leader. I can't speak enough about her character and her integrity and her gift. I'm not even trying to toot her own horn, man. She is traveling the globe. She's taken the world by storm. She's an incredible leader, and but she believes in what we're doing here, and she believes in you, and she believes in this generation. And when I reached out to her a few months ago, it wasn't even like, oh, let me look at my schedule, let me think about it. She's like, no, whatever it is, like, I'll be there. And so she's become a good friend of mine and my wife's, and I'm just telling you, as someone I had the honor and I believe in what she's doing and how God's equipped her. And she's going to share something tonight that she just told me backstage a few minutes ago. It's a personal message. It's going to be applicable, something you can walk away with, but it's personal. And so I love when a leader gets up and chooses to be humble and just be vulnerable and authentic. So I hope that resonates with you tonight. And if tonight you just love the message, or you're thinking of that person going, man, I wish they would have heard it, we're recording it. You'll be able to go to our YouTube page and be able to watch that or send that to some friends. So if you would just please do me the pleasure and welcome Miss Kristen Fry.
Oh, thank you, Justin. Hey, you guys, it's so great to be here. I was thinking as I was driving over here that one of the things that I love about events like Friendsgiving is that it's one thing for us to celebrate with our family because, you know, we kind of have to and we didn't get to choose them. We were just born into our family. But Friendsgiving is something totally different. It's the family that we got to choose. And so I love that for someone like me, who I am not from Georgia. I'm from California. And so when I go to things like this, it's an opportunity for me to celebrate with the people that have become like family to me. And so I am a huge fan of things like this. And I also thought it's interesting that sharing a meal with people is a lot more personal than we realize. I don't know if you've ever thought about it like that. You're sitting at a table, you're forced to make conversation, you have to look at people in the eye, and studies have actually shown that people who regularly share meals with other people have a better sense of well-being. So congratulations. But here's the other thing that's really interesting about that is that there is a generation of people who are coming up who have interacted with people through screens way more than they have interacted with people in real life at a table. And scientists are now telling us that our relational skills are diminishing as a result. I mean, have you ever sat at coffee or lunch or dinner? I have. And it felt like you're pulling teeth to try to get the person to have a conversation with you. And it was like all of a sudden whatever was on their phone was way more interesting than what was happening right in front of them. And I thought, are you out of your mind? We could have stayed home for this if this is what you were going to do. And yet, what's more interesting is that there's an app on our phone that has been created specifically to help us all feel more connected. Any guesses what that app is? Facebook. It's Facebook. We all have Facebook on our phones. And here's the thing. Okay, so listen to this. The mission of Facebook is this. It is to give people the power to build community and bring the world closer together. That was why Facebook was invented, to allow people to be more connected. And yet, here's the vision of Facebook. It is that people would stay connected, to discover what's going on, and to share and express what matters to them. We all want this outlet to be known. I mean, and so here's a social media platform that's helping us do that, because even social media and even technology recognizes that we just want a place that we are connected, and we want a place that we can be connected. And clearly it's working, because look at these Facebook statistics, okay? Number one, there are 2.45 billion monthly active users. That's insane. 1 month, 2.45 billion monthly active users. There are 43,000 employees at Facebook. 43,000 people are employed to make sure that app on your phone is loading correctly. Next one, there are 5 new profiles created every second. So imagine what's happened in the time that you guys have all been here. 300 million photo uploads every day. 300 million. And every 60 seconds, 510,000 comments are made every 60 seconds. And the largest user demographic, which I thought this was kind of interesting, are 25 to 34-year-olds. So it just goes to show we just love to be connected. And there's nothing wrong with Facebook friends. I mean, I'm a huge fan of social media. I'm on Facebook all the time, so I'm one of these stats. But we also need face-to-face friends. We need people who are going to show up. And the reason is that we're not digital beings. I mean, we all know that. We're physical human beings, and we have souls. And it's one thing for someone to write in a comment, hey, let me know what you need, or hey, I'm here for you. It is something entirely different when someone physically shows up for you. I mean, we know that. I mean, when relationships are missing, it's, we notice it. When you're sitting home, I'll use me as an example. If I'm sitting home at a Friday night or Saturday night or a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night, and it's like, oh gosh, I'm kind of bored. I'll start scrolling through social media to look for this point of connection. And then all of a sudden what I'm doing is I'm seeing all these people who are actually out of their house and they're with people. And I didn't get invited, but I know those people. So now I feel worse about myself. And so this app on my phone that I went to looking for a point of connection now makes me realize I'm disconnected and unconnected, and I'm still on my couch and I'm still all alone. And so now that's left me no better than when I first opened up my phone. And so there's something to be said for the fact that social media is great. And this isn't a knock on social media at all. But we have to have friends in our life who will show up for us. And I was thinking through, gosh, what do those friends look like? And here's the friends that I have found that have been really important to me, because we all need someone in our life, right? And preferably we need someones in our life. And here's what we want those someones to look like. And the first is this. We want friends in our life who you can be honest with. You want friends who you can speak without editing. You want friends who you're not afraid who are going to judge you. You want friends who you can say, here's what I'm thinking and feeling. You just need friends that you can be honest with, and that's a little bit tricky to do online. Secondly, you need friends who are going to show up. You need friends who are going to show up at 2 o'clock in the morning. You need friends who are going to show up on the side of the road when you have a flat tire. You need friends who are going to show up when you need a ride home from the airport. You need a friend who's going to show up when you call and they actually answer their phone. I mean, there are people I've noticed on their cell phones, they have like that little phone app. It's kind of hidden away in a folder. I was like, oh my gosh, you need to use that. Like, answer. You need friends who show up. And the next one is you need friends who are honest with you. You need them to say the hard thing and not always what you want to hear. That's what a real friend does. You want them to be able to say the truth to you and not sugarcoat it because they're afraid of how you are going to react. And lastly, you need friends who get you out of your house. I mean, come on. You need friends who say, hey, let's get out. You've been here too long. Let's go do something. I don't care what that something is, but let's go and interact with the rest of the world. Like, those are the types of friends that you have to have in your life. And you might be thinking, oh, that's awesome. Okay, I get it. But how do I get these friends? First of all, we know that friends like this don't happen overnight, and not all of your friends will be like that. And that's okay. It's no big deal. But if you want those kinds of friends, you have to work at it. For anything of value takes intention. Anything of value is going to take effort. And all these types of friendships have a couple things in common, and it's this: transparency and consistency over time. You have to have people who you are seeing regularly, who you are being honest with. You have to have people who you can read their facial expressions and who can read your facial expressions. And that doesn't happen the first time you meet someone, and it doesn't happen the second time you meet someone. And a lot of times we'll meet people and we'll think, oh gosh, we really need some good friends. And so they'll, hang out with a person a time or two and go, I forget it, they're weird, I don't like them. But I'm like, oh my gosh, you all have figured out how to be in bad dating relationships for a far longer amount of time. You can figure out how to give this friendship a shot. I mean, that's just true. And again, you might get to the point where like, okay, this isn't it. But you never know if you don't give real friendships a shot. So take all of that. And now let me tell you why all this matters for me. Let me tell you why this is so important to me. Whether you are an extrovert or an introvert, you do not need convincing that we have been wired for connection. We just have. God created us to want to connect to other people. God created us to want to be in community. God created us for relationships. It's just in us. I was driving, actually, this is funny, a couple days ago, and I was listening to one of the local radio stations, and people were calling in saying these weird things that they do, which is normal on the radio. And this person called in, and she goes, what? She goes, whenever I return shopping carts, whenever I'm done shopping and I return shopping carts in the parking lot, I always make sure I put the shopping cart with all the other shopping carts because I don't want it to be lonely and feel left out. And I was like, is this real? Like, what am I listening to? And then the next person calls in and she goes, they're both girls. That's interesting. I just thought about that. The next person called in and she goes, whenever I pick up my dog's toys at the end of the night, I always make sure I put them all like in the same basket because I don't want any of them to be left out somewhere in a corner and feel lonely while we're all sleeping. And I was like, you are adults. What is going on? And then I started thinking, I'm driving home and I thought, I guess that in some ways that makes sense. I remember when I was a kid, I would have all my stuffed animals and I vaguely remember putting them like on a shelf. And I remember thinking or probably saying to them, okay, you guys all have fun, be good while I'm gone, don't get lonely. But I was 7 and these are adults, but it just goes to show that it is just in us so much to want to connect and build relationships that we now ascribe that to inanimate objects, shopping carts and dog toys and stuffed animals. So it's just in us. And here's the thing that I love is that several of the authors in the New Testament, they understood this too. They probably understood this far more than any of us. And specifically, I want to talk about the author who wrote the book of Hebrews. So the book of Hebrews, it's a letter in the New Testament, and the Hebrews were a group of people who were sort of new to this whole following Jesus thing. So they were Jewish people who used to live according to the law. They used to live according to this old way of living. They had a list of things they could and couldn't do in order to be right before God. And then Jesus comes on the scene, and it's, okay, here's this new way of living in freedom and all that whole, okay, I got to be super careful to do this and not do this. That went away. And so now they're living in community, and they're trying to figure out, hey, what does this look like to be a Jesus person? What does this look like to be a Christian? How do I follow God? And how do we figure that out together? And they were living during a time where there was just a lot of competing worldviews, and so there's a lot of opinions about how they should live their life. And there was a lot of people saying, why don't you just go back and do it the old way? So much easier. Does that sound familiar to any of us? How many times are we walking around trying to develop new patterns or trying to develop new ways of living, and we hear all these competing voices that say, just go back and do it the old way, it's way easier. You know how that works, it's way easier. Or everyone has an opinion about your life, or culture has an opinion about your life, and it's just easy to get swayed and go, gosh, what's true, what's not true? And so that is all of the context that was happening when the author was writing to this group of people called the Hebrews, which again, it's not all that different from us here 2,000 plus years later. But so think of that context in these 2 verses, and he writes and he says this. It's near the end of the letter, so in chapter 10, and he says, hey guys, let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. And let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return, that's Jesus, is drawing near. Let us not neglect meeting together. And at first glance, it's like, okay, got it, meet together, we're in. But I think to really understand the importance of what he was saying, this author knew that if the Christians continued to meet together, and if they continued to be honest with each other, and if they continued to bounce these ideas back and forth off, they would be able then to be mirrors to one another and reflections to one another and be able to say, hey, I know you think that's the right way, but pause, hold on, rewind, take a step back. That might not be the best way to go. That might not be the answer you're looking for. I know that seems easier. I know that seems like you should be going in that direction, but hold on. The author knew, hey, if you just meet together and if you are intentional in your relationships, people can speak truth into that. And they can say, hey, yeah, good, bad, good, bad. And so it was really, really important, especially as they were trying to figure out how to live life well, that they would just meet together. And it's really important for us to do that too. And let me tell you why this is so, so personal for me and for my life. See, there is a reason that God has designed us to live in community and not be like these one-man islands. And I learned that loud and clear these most recent years, and I'll sort of tell you the story about what happened this year. But the reason why this is so important is because isolation is one of the enemy's weapons against us. I don't know if you've ever thought about that. Isolation is one of the enemy's weapons against us. But community is one of our weapons against the enemy. And I don't know if you've ever thought of community being a weapon or isolation being a weapon against us or community being something that we can go on the offense with. But let me unpack what I mean by that, because I think if you really understand this idea, you will walk out of here and you will never live without community again. So let me kind of uncover this, and then I'll tell you how this played out in my life this past year. So let me tell you what I know is true about every single one of you sitting in this room. I don't have to have a conversation with you. I don't have to scroll through your social media or go through your emails. This is true about every single person sitting in this room. You have been created on purpose. There is a plan for your life, and it is a good plan. God has designed it that you would have a great life, an abundant life, a life filled with purpose. God did not create you to just skate through life and think, is this all there is? Nobody has your DNA. Nobody has your life experiences. Nobody has your personality or skill set or family or dreams or hopes. Nobody has that but you, which means you are the only person that can fill the purpose for your life. That's just true about every single person sitting in this room and me. But here's what's also true. Sometimes life feels really hard. Sometimes we wonder if God cares. Sometimes we're confused, and sometimes we're tired, and sometimes we're hurting, and sometimes we feel like we are sitting here waving the white flag in surrender, and God's not coming to our rescue. And sometimes we wonder if our life is a joke. Sometimes we wonder if it's a mistake or it's on accident. And we're just wondering, does God really care about me? Because it looks like everyone else is living this great purpose-filled life, and I'm just sitting here in the corner wondering, when is it going to be my turn? I guess never. We all think those things. That's just normal. But the problem is that when we get into isolation and we don't ever have anyone to say that to and reflect, hey, what we're thinking and feeling, what ends up happening is all that stuff, they start to be really, really loud voices in our life. And all these things that are true about us, they become to be quiet. They're quieter and quieter and quieter. So we're wondering, maybe that's not true. Maybe that must not be true. I guess my life is a joke and it's boring and there's no purpose in it. And we see this shift happen in our life because we're isolated ourselves from anyone to reflect back what we're thinking and what we're saying. And so for me, 2019, this year that we are in, has been one of the hardest years of my adult life for several different reasons. And we're still not done with 2019, so I hope it gets better, but I don't know. But this year, in no particular order, actually, this year has included things like by the 1st of January, I felt like I was walking into a incredible just betrayal from a friend. It was someone that I trusted and someone that I thought was really in my corner, and just the rejection that I felt from that, and it just I just did not see that coming. If anyone knows, what it's like to just be betrayed by a really good friend. And so I was like, okay, well, I can, that alone, okay, that sucked, but okay. This year also included just a really, really painful breakup for me. it sideswiped me in ways that I just never saw coming. You know, I've been an adult for a while now, and so there's been other breakups, but shoot, this one was the worst. This year also included 2 different work contracts that had just disintegrated before my very eyes. And so the partners that I was working with, they had, for 2 different partners, they had said, wow, Kristen, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I have never seen something like this happen before. And I'm like, cool, that's awesome. You know, I was like, what do you want me to do about that? That doesn't make me feel any better. This year also included a season where my character and my integrity was attacked by people, in the church and out of the church. So people, attacking you and does not discriminate. This year also included, there was a time where my life values and choices were called into question, and it just really put me in a tailspin, and it left me wondering, have I been making all the wrong choices with my life this whole time? Have I gotten this all wrong? And it got to the point by the middle of this year that I was on the phone with a friend, and I was in tears with her, and I just said, I don't know that I can do this anymore. I don't know what's happening. I don't know. Have I made mistake with my life? Have I chosen all of the wrong things? I don't know what else to do. What in the world is God doing? And I remember I have been down this road before. This is not the first hard year I've ever had. I knew the drill because it was several years ago. I was in a different hard season, and I was speaking at something like this, and some friends had come to stay, to hang out with me. And so I got off stage, and I remember kind of standing in the corner, and I got into conversation with some of my friends, and I said, man, life is really hard right now, and I don't know what's going to happen with my life. And my friend looked at me very quietly and just said, oh, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. God's doing something. You'll be fine. And I remember looking at her going, I don't know if I believe that anymore. And she looked at me without skipping a beat, and she said, that's okay. I'll believe that for you until you can. And that sentence has stuck with me all of these years. And so when I got to this year and all these crappy things felt like they were happening all at the same time, that I was going to just be crushed under the weight of it, I remembered that, and I thought, okay, Kristen, you know how to do this. And so I started off by sent out an email to about a dozen of my friends. Some lived in Georgia, some didn't. And I just said, hey, I'm emotionally spent. Here's what's happening. I need help. I need you to help me get through this. I need you to know where I'm at. And so, there's people all over the country that were praying. There were friends who showed up, and they gave me, they gave a night, and they said, okay, we're going to all sit in the living room, and we're going to pray through 4 categories of your life. And this is what we're going to do, and we're going to say, God, we need you to move. And it's okay that you don't believe that right now, Kristen, but we're going to walk through this with you. There were seasons this year where people were calling me every day, some asking questions, some saying, I'm here, some saying, what do you need? There were people who texted every single day. There were people someone showed up with ice cream one time. That was awesome. But there were people who physically showed up. There are 3 people, I might cry if I look at them. There are 3 people who are sitting in this room right now, and they physically showed up for me. And we sat on couches and patios, and we went on walks, and they heard me say some of the same things over and over and over and over and over again, because I was a broken record, and they listened over and over and over and over again. I mean, they showed up. Community showed up. And there have been so many times when my circumstances and my emotions wanted me to believe that God is not real. There is no great thing happening in my life, and I wanted to doubt, and I wanted to question everything. But people showed up and said, Kristen, I will believe that for you, and I will stand in the gap until you can believe it. And it's interesting because we think that we, especially as Christians, that we can't admit any of that stuff. Like, we think people are going to judge us, or we think people are going to look differently, or we think, oh, you're not really a good Christian if you think God's not good. Well, you know what? That's called being human. It is okay, and God can handle it, and people can handle it. And it doesn't make God less true, and it doesn't make any of the things about your life less true. What it does is it allows people to stand in the gaps for you. And it allows people to believe when you can't believe. You know, the greatest strategy of the enemy is to get you into isolation and keep you into isolation. It's not because you're sitting there all by yourself believing nothing. It's because you're sitting there believing everything. And that's where the danger is. Isolation can be such a breeding ground for negative talk and self-doubt and questioning everything. And I'm talking about something totally different than just being a normal independent adult, okay? It's like putting yourself into a hole, into a cave. And when there's a gap between belief and unbelief, when we're by ourselves, that gap begins to get wider and wider and wider and wider. And so I learned that for me, when I'm not honest with the people in my life, I'm robbing them of the opportunity to stand in the gaps and help me believe until I can. And the same goes for you. If you are not honest with your community, you are robbing them of the opportunity to do what community is supposed to do. God designed it like this. You know, I don't know how many times I've heard people say, I don't want to tell people. I don't want to burden them. Gosh, they have so much going on. They have so much going on in their life. I don't want to do that. I mean, have you ever had a friend come up to you and say, hey, can I just talk to you for a minute? This is really hard right now. I just need someone to listen. And have you ever thought to yourself, no, that's super burdensome. Oh my gosh, no, of course you didn't do that. And nobody's thinking that about you. You have to be willing to take the first step and invite people into community and into your lives. You know, Jesus says that he didn't come to just give us any life, but to give us an abundant life and a life full of purpose. And he doesn't just make our lives better, he makes us better at life. And he did not create us to do life alone, and he did not create us to do this whole following Jesus thing alone. But when we get alone, the gap between unbelief and belief is wider and wider and wider, and pretty soon we start acting on that because we act on what we believe. So let me just say this before we wrap up. What I know is that life can be hard. You know that too. You live this. But what I also know is that friends can make life less hard and less lonely and more fun. But you have to want to live that kind of life. You have to be willing to say, hey, I'm in this with you. You have to be willing to put in the work to develop the kind of friends who are going to roll up their sleeves and they're going to get in it with you and they're going to say, I'm going to stand in that gap and I'm going to believe until you can believe for yourself. Which is why I'm so excited about things like tonight. Because this is one of those ways that we can stand shoulder to shoulder with people and say, all right, we're in this together. Let me pray for us. God, I am so thankful that you have created us to live in community. I am so thankful that you have not made it so that we live life alone. And so I pray for every person in this room. And God, I don't know what we're going through, but first of all, I pray that we would stand in truth. I pray that we would believe what is true. I pray that we would believe what is true about us and what is true about you. And I pray that you would put us in front of other people where we could have those same conversations. And if we need more friends, then God, help us develop more friends. But more than anything, we know that you are God who has not created us to do life alone. And so for that, I am so thankful. And we just pray all this in your son's name. Amen.